Welcome to the virtual exhibition of the new arts organization, the Inspiration Art Group International. We are honored and pleased to introduce our program host, Bettina Wilkerson, who we know and love as Poet Gold. She is one of New York State's esteemed poet laureates. Now over to you. Take it, Poet Gold.
Off to a flashy start. The hand. Whether we believe in God or not, one thing is for sure. Mankind did not create the universe. So believe what we want. Just know it's not our hand in all things. Welcome everyone to our 2022 Address Earth Art Expo virtual exhibit. I'm your host, Poet Gold. To learn more about Inspirational Art Group International, its members, and the physical locations of our in-person exhibition of Address Earth, please visit inspirationartgroup.org. Today's exhibit, Liquid Blue, is a heartfelt letter to the ocean from the artist Karen LaFleur and musician Nancy Tucker. It's a gift of reflection on the ocean's multitude of marine creatures that swim in its waters, a spotlight on its astonishing variety of interdependent connections, a reminder of the ocean's vulnerability, and a thank you to the ocean for its incredible beauty and environmental support of the human species. Let's begin our show with our producer, Bridget Pavlo, at the helm. We present to you Liquid Blue in 4 segments. Each segment will begin with a short animation and 7 digital artworks. Now for the animation entitled Soundwave.
Liquid Blue is an imaginary homage to the world's greatest living marine ecosystem, one that defines us as the blue planet. 2 artists create artworks, animations, and music that speculates on the ocean's biodiversity and highlights the fragility of its ecosystem. The ocean is a complex, interconnected system vital to our planet's ability to sustain life. Some systems, such as currents, weather, and temperature, we can see and feel easily. But there are other systems difficult for our senses to experience due to ocean depths, water pressure, or just our limited ability to see and hear underwater. But that doesn't mean these systems don't exist. Acoustic marine scientists speculate that baby coral listen for healthy coral reefs to settle on. The animation Sound Waves explores sound disruption in this sensitive marine environment.
Artwork. Number one, we can bring up the first artwork, echolocate. Echolocate. Often creatures use echolocation to bounce off objects, locate food, and explore their environment. The artwork, echolocation, captures these sound waves in a lush coral reef environment. Artwork 2, Reef Talk. The artwork Reef Talk depicts the chatter of ocean creatures on a coral reef. Artwork 3, Ocean Hum. The ocean isn't silent. It hums with the sounds of crashing waves, whale songs, echolocation, and the numerous pops and clicks of fish call. Artwork 4, Dolphin Hello. What hello looks like underwater. Artwork 5, Heartbeat. Hydrophones have recently recorded fish mating calls. This helps identify spawning grounds and protect them as they shift season by season across the ocean floor. Artwork 6, Whale Songs. Whale songs at low frequency can travel over 10,000 miles across the ocean. Their songs refract up and down in areas of the ocean called sound channels, which allows whale songs to travel great distances. Artwork 7, Krill Chatter. Krill are tiny crustaceans related to crab and shrimp. They are essential to the marine food chain. Their estimated biomass is around 300 to 500 million tons. Many produce sound using their mouth parts. I'd like to bring up the artists, Karen LaFleur and Nancy Tucker, to ask you guys a few questions about what we've seen so far. So, Karen, let me ask you this. When did you first become interested in marine acoustics, and how does it influence your artwork?
Well, I was kind of raised on the ocean, so I was by the ocean all the time, and I was aware of the different ocean sounds, but I probably became most aware of it when I was about 10 years old. I had a little boat, and I would go through the marshes. And when you're in the marsh, there's no horizon. It's just you're in the marsh, because usually the channels are lower than the tall grass. And you had to really rely on your different senses. And I began to realize all the sounds that were happening between the creatures in the marsh. Later, when I was in my teens, I worked with a small aquarium that rescued injured sea animals, dolphins, whales, all different kinds. And I understood by working with them that there was also acoustic communication going on. In terms of my artwork, my artwork sort of works on opposites. So I think of sound as in waves working across the screen. So they're sort of the counterbalance to the brushstrokes that are going on.
Where did you grow up? Because you speak about the marshes. Where was your actual geographic location?
My geographic location was Boston, which is obviously an ocean city,
Right.
but most of my time was spent on Cape Cod and the islands back, and I'll date myself, the early 50s. So it was really dirt roads and a few little boats in the harbor. So you really got to understand the marine environment.
Got it. And Nancy, how do you choose which instruments to compose with on each individual animation?
Sometimes I'll hear an instrument in my head as I look at stills or the actual animation. And if that doesn't happen, if I'm not hearing anything, I'll go to the keyboard, which is called a keyboard workstation. It's like a synthesizer. It'll play any instrument. And I just start brainstorming. I scroll through. There are hundreds of instruments on it.
Hmm.
And when I find something I think might work, I make a note, and then usually I'll choose 3 or 4 more, just in case that one doesn't work. And then I start to try to create the mood of the
Mhm.
animation with the music. And that's pretty much how I work. And if I find one instrument works or several instruments work, I'll put them all together into one piece of music.
So the artwork sort of stimulates a step-by-step progression for you in the creation of it all.
Yes, sometimes I don't get the whole animation at once, so I'm kind of working in the dark. But
Okay.
for some reason, Karen and I are synced up so well that the music just fits with the animation. It feels like magic, but I think we're just on the same wavelength.
Absolutely. I've definitely the same energy because I've had the opportunity to see previous work of you guys, and it amazes me how in sync you are. So I'm going to ask you ladies to go backstage for a little bit. I'll bring you back up after segment 2. And Bridget, if we can bring up Microplastic Animation as we begin segment 2. I appreciate you can take me off the screen because I'm having some technical difficulty while you are showing the animation. Thank you.
Microplastics clump together with tiny particles of detritus called ocean snow and sink to the bottom floor where they are eaten by small creatures in the depths. The animation, Microplastics, speaks to the problem of microplastic in our oceans as they travel up and down the food chain but never disappear.
Titled Plankton Tangle. Whether filter feeders, suspension feeders, or predatory feeders, microplastic is a problem for most marine creatures up and down the food chain. Even tiny plankton ingest and get tangled in microplastics. Artwork 2. Salp chain. Salps are primitive filter feeding animals that look like gelatinous string of pearls. Each dot in the jelly-like chain is an individual that swims with its own stroke. But when threatened or encountering strong currents, they coordinate their swim strokes to avoid predators and travel distances. Artwork 3. Plankton bloom. Plankton blooms happen when these tiny creatures rise up into sunlight layers of the ocean in large concentration. Their numbers can be so numerous, they create floating cloud patterns near the surface and change the color of the water. Artwork 4. Sea stars. There are 1,900 species of sea stars, also called brittle stars or starfish. They live in ranges from the intertidal zone to 20,000 feet below the ocean surface. Fossil records show they have been around for 450 million years. Artwork 5. Jellyfish. Jellyfish have been on our planet for about 600 million years. It's estimated there are over 300,000 species that travel up and down and across the water column. They often produce large quantity of mucus that traps and absorbs floating particles. Artwork 6. Larvation. Larvaceans are tadpole-sized creatures. They live deep in the ocean and collect food via a yard-wide circle of mucus around their tiny body that traps whatever particles drift by. Artwork 7. Sea fans. Sea fans are deep-sea corals that offer shelter, food, and act as nurseries for marine creatures who live in the depths of the ocean. They feed on floating microscopic particles, grow very slowly in the murky dark, and can live for thousands of years. Let's invite back up our artists, Karen LaFleur and Nancy Tucker, to talk about the artwork in segment 2, microplastics. What made you aware, Karen, of the microplastic problem, and how does it influence your artwork?
Well, I think it's, again, been a journey since my childhood. When I was on the beaches as a child, mostly I would find a tiny piece of natural fiber rope, or I would find sandblasted glass in tiny pieces, usually from the turn of the century. But then as I got older, I had a project with my son in high school, and this was around the mid-'80s, and we took 1 yard square of the beach and we just went down and collected whatever we found for 2 weeks. And we found over 300 items in that 1 yard square. They weren't all microplastics, but they were just not supposed to be there. Bring it forward to the beautiful beaches that, Cape Cod has, and one thinks of microplastics as being a problem elsewhere. But last January, I went for a walk on the beach, and there had been a big storm, and a huge bank of seaweed had come in and filled the whole bay a couple of feet high. And every 2 to 3 inches, there was a very tiny piece, about a bottle cap size piece of plastic, and I was appalled. So it's been a journey of consciousness across. I've always been aware, but it's increasing, unfortunately.
And some of the marine life today are actually eating bottle caps.
Yes.
It's tragic.
It is. And actually, that is why a lot of the creatures that I have in this show feed on this mucous membrane that's around them, because not only are they eating the microplastics, it's getting entrapped inside their system. So they aren't specifically eating it, but it's part of them, and then they get eaten. So it's a problem from all directions.
And then we eat.
Yes.
Right? It's just like one big science fiction nightmare, so to speak. The artwork is beautiful, but the story of our humanity, of how we treat our environment and our lack of care for it is really kind of nightmarish. Nancy, Let me ask you this. What is your process, in this whole plastic conceptually? How do you begin and where do you go from there?
When I compose a piece of music for an animation, I sit down at the keyboard after I've chosen what instruments I want to use.
Mm-hmm.
And I just put my hands over the keyboard and I start playing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a matter of forcing the sounds. It's a matter of following what I think the music wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
I make a lot of mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes will turn into something beautiful. So I'm not terribly upset if I go off into a direction that I wasn't thinking it would go.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very long process because I'm really listening through the whole thing and trying to find what I'm looking for or where I think the music wants to go. I record all of it, and then I go back and I just try to weed through what really works. So
I want to hone in on when you talked about mistakes. I often share with artists never to, regardless of the artistic medium that you're in, never discard your mistakes.
yeah,
And don't beat yourself up when you make the mistakes. Embrace them, because as you said, it may lead you to someplace beautiful.
yep, it's true.
And so it often happens, in music. We're in the studio recording, and you do this little thing. You go, oh, that wasn't supposed to be there, but it worked.
Right.
So you keep it.
Yeah.
Thank you, ladies. I'm going to ask you to go backstage again, and I'm going to bring you back up again for segment 3. So we can bring up our next animation for segment 3, Currents, entitled Currents.
The ocean covers 71% of the Earth's surface and stores heat energy. This water circulates around the globe on currents, spreading nutrients, stabilizing weather patterns, and affecting the fluctuation of temperatures. The animation Currents is a homage to this complex system of flowing water, the beautiful shorelines it creates along the way, and the profusion of marine life that swims in its waters.
Artwork number one. Can we do number one again, water drop? I was on mute. Artwork number one, water drop. It takes a molecule of water about 1,000 years to travel around the planet on ocean currents called the global conveyor belt, driven by temperature and salinity. Artwork 2, kelp forests. Kelp forests are home to a wide variety of marine species and plant life. They provide food, shelter, and protect coastlines from wave and ocean current erosion. Artwork 3, my beautiful ocean. As a child, I traveled in a small boat deep into the tall grass marshlands. I navigated my way through twisting channels by dipping my hand in the water to feel the strength of its current, and always following the main flow of water as a guide. Artwork 4, coral larvae. Coral larvae float in ocean currents for days and sometimes weeks before settling and attaching to the ocean floor. Recent studies in marine acoustics hope to discover how coral larvae listen for a healthy reef to settle on. Artwork 5, Equator and the North Pole. Ocean waters are always moving, whether by tide, by wave, or by current. Currents move water thousands of miles around the globe, generated by heat from the sun and cooler Arctic poles. Artwork 6, horizontal migration. Many sea creatures migrate on ocean's currents, traveling thousands of miles to breeding grounds or seasonal feeding locations. And not just the adults migrate. Many egg, larvae, and juvenile stages migrate on a global ocean currents far beyond the original birthing grounds to establish adult life patterns. And the final artwork, number 7, vertical migration. Around 5 billion metric tons of krill, jellyfish, plankton, and other deep sea creatures migrate each night from ocean depths to the surface. They make the journey to feed and sometimes mate before sinking back into the dark depths. This is the largest biomass migration on the planet. Their movement is important to the ocean's food chain, as creatures swim up and down their passage, causes turbulence, and move essential nutrients across waterway boundaries. If we can bring our artists back up, Karen LaFleur, Nancy Tucker. Hi, guys. I'm enjoying your show. This exhibit. I really am. It's wonderful, and it's also informative. You know, for people who may not have a science background, who may not, have a vast knowledge of nature and the ocean floor, and so I really appreciate this show. Karen, what made you aware of ocean currents? I'm curious about that, and how do currents influence your artwork?
Well, again, it goes back to the childhood. Back then, pretty much, at 8 a.m, you left the house, and if you come back at dinner, and I was given a boat at age 10. So pretty much the ocean was my playground, and I had to learn it myself. So I had to figure out what currents were dangerous, what ones were safe, why they were happening, when they were happening. And so you became a great observer of just almost still water. I can tell which way the currents are flowing. And then you bring it up into the marsh experience. That experience taught me the different depths of currents, the warmer versus the colder, because sometimes the water was going opposite as you put your hand down. So that whole experience taught me about movement. And movement in my artwork is really, really important. I always knew it was, because I was always headed towards animation or stories that moved across the page in single panels. But when I worked with Palabolas Dance Company on their community dance project for 2 years, they would allow the public to come in and work with their choreographers. I really learned about movement. And that's when the animation really started to push that envelope. So that's how it has affected me through my life.
I'm curious about the boat.
Yes.
How big was this boat?
That's about an 8-footer with a little 3-horse motor, and I had oars. So when I went into the marsh, you would use your oars. And,
so it was a boat. So and how old were you? How old were you?
10. My friend and I were both given our own boats, so we would go.
Nice.
And sort of the rule was, don't go out beyond the half-mile marker.
Right.
I don't know if you've been 200 feet into the ocean, but it gets pretty rough out there.
Yeah, and it can get pretty scary.
Yeah, so I didn't go that far, but pretty much I hugged the coast, and I learned so much from nature.
Yeah, I used to go out on the boat as a child with my grandfather when we would fish, and the deeper out in Quag, and the deeper we got out into the ocean, the more scary it would become, especially for a 10-year-old. So I'm going to give it up to you for your bravery and your sense of adventure of going out there. Have you ever, I'm going to digress a little bit because I was curious about the boat. And initially when you said, yeah, my family gave me a boat, I'm thinking like, the little boat that you put in the tub with you when you're playing, and then the more you spoke about it, I was like, oh no, I think this is like a rowboat type of boat. Have you ever done any art series about that time visually with the boat, sort of like telling the story of that time visually?
I think all my artwork is based back to that time in my life, from what I learned. Like I said, in generalities of movement, sound, listening to my artwork, I've always felt as though I'm building worlds, environments. And that all comes from that experience. I mean, really back then, there were only 3 boats in the harbor.
Okay.
So, and one was a fishing boat, and it was my boat, and then somebody else had a boat. So there really wasn't a lot of congestion. It was really just being with nature. So
wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Nancy, what was particularly inspiring about these 3 animations for you?
My parents never would have trusted me with a boat, by the way. My family spent a couple of weeks every summer on Cape Cod. And when I was 3, it was the first time that we went. They opened up the car, and before they knew what was happening, I ran straight for the water. I loved the ocean. I loved the light, the crabs, the sounds, everything about it. And that was my happy place. Okay. So everything I've written for for these 3 animations really comes from the heart. I mean, I hope Karen does more ocean animations, because it just came straight from the heart.
No, really, it's beautiful. I would encourage you to reach out to Clarkson University and Beacon Institute and share this work with them, because it really is fascinating. I think the students would have a great appreciation for this body of work. So let's bring up our last segment 4, which consists of simply one animation video called Postcards from the Ocean. Once again, ladies, I will thank you. And Bridget, if we can bring up the final segment. Bravo, bravo. So, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of our virtual exhibit, Liquid Blue. We wish to thank our viewers. And if you wish to view this virtual exhibit again, you can find it on YouTube and learn more about our in-person exhibitions of Address Earth. Please visit inspirationartgroup.org. That's inspirationartgroup.org. And we have 2 locations, physical location, in person, for the Address Earth exhibit. You can visit Hudson Valley Museum of Contemporary Art and also Western Connecticut University. I want to thank our founder for the Inspirational Art Group, Bibiana Wong Matthijs. And thank you to both Karen LaFleur and Nancy Tucker for this important and enlightening composition of science, art, and music. This concludes our program. Thank you all for watching. Once again, I'm your host, Poet Gold.